Okay, thank you. I'm going to restrain myself from taking the opportunity as chair to ask my own questions straight from the off, unless there's a lack of questions from the floor. So I'll put it out there first. Who wants to go first?
I'm just going to sit under the table.
I don't think I can discuss this as a general question. It's really a question for Rabbi Lebens. It's to try and understand precisely what your methodology is.
I wouldn't try and do that.
Well, let me ask you this. My understanding is that what you're saying is that there's a theological proposition that you find questionable. The first test is whether it's utterly unsustainable. If it's utterly unsustainable, then I think in your words it's legitimate to do violence to the sources and reinterpret the set. But if it's not utterly unsustainable, then you study A, what it is, and B, whether you believe it. Now, my difficulty was in understanding why the demons passed the test of being unsustainable.
Okay.
Torah Kalmon failed.
Okay. So let me try and answer, and I'll, in doing so, I'll try and answer some of the other questions that people fielded to me in the break, and then maybe that will mean there'll be more time to have questions for the both of us. The best way I can say it is, let's put it this way. There's a lot of mythology in Judaism, okay? And what's really interesting about how Judaism evolves is that we keep creating new myths out of older ones. So for instance, the rabbis of the Gemara would read Brightot, like earlier rabbinic texts, and try to fit them into the halacha, and it didn't work. So they would violently reinterpret them sometimes, as if they had no concern for the original intent of the authorship. How is that okay? Well, I think that what's happening is Judaism is this kind of body of myth, and I don't mean myth in a pejorative way, that cannibalizes itself and grows out of itself. And I'm interested in articulating, looking at all of the texts and almost articulating my own myth, right? And I'm interested in the methods by which earlier rabbis did that from earlier sources, and then I want to do the same thing as they did from the sources in my past. And one of the things they do is to say, well, I really want to respect this body of text, and I want to accommodate as much of it as I can. But if there's something which completely offends either against my ethics or against my metaphysics or against then I'm going to do my very best to kind of massage that text. I couldn't find anything really offensive about the Torah Kadmon mythology, but I find there are interesting problems whichever way you might want to go, and I think it's a cool project for Jews to try to articulate the possibilities. I wasn't trying to say that what does Judaism think, to articulate the possibilities latent in the stories and myths and whatever that we have. And it's another much harder and it's another much harder question that I don't think we can get into right now. Why sign on to a myth? And it's not as simple as is it true or is it false? I spoke yesterday about the relationship between naive theology and sophisticated theology, and I don't want to repeat all that, so talk to me some other time. There are going to be some beliefs that I really think it's important to talk about truth and falsehood, like I really believe that God exists, but I might think that we access him through myths. And then the interesting question isn't whether the myths are true or false, but what's true according to the myth. And I'm trying to build a consistent picture from inside a certain mythic perspective. And that's all I want to say right now. But thank you for the question.
Question for Rabbi Dr. You're talking in the article about the concepts of inclusivity and personality and mention of God. How concerned are you about the ultra-Orthodox perverting these principles or using these and going against that sense of mention of God? I saw the article by Cosmic Rabbi Kendler, who talks about the incident of that Shepherd, the 8-year-old girl, and he was talking about the issue there of sexualization or justification. How, in your mind, how big a concern do you have about converting these principles?
Yeah, I think that the Haredi world also believes in these principles, and what really concerns me is that there's something sociological going on, and there's political, really, when it's a matter of power politics. I see it in the issues of, it's not only in the Haredi world, but when there are cases of molestation, there are cases where children are not being protected properly, and when a parent goes to the police, then the community attacks the parent for going to the police. So I think that the big problem is fear, that there's a tremendous amount of fear of the outside, fear of the world, and the real problem of structures, communal structures that are highly problematic. And so I think that really the Haredi world would agree with everything in this thesis. I think maybe even the Israel stuff, how the Haredi world is very much on the right of not giving away territory and not doing this and giving it to Hamas and all that stuff. So they might not celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, but they're very connected to Israel, except for the fringe of the Satmar, and really only the fringe. So I think the key thing is, what concerns me is that when the Haredi world doesn't really practice the values that they really share. Now again, it's not only the Haredi world, also the modern Orthodox world, when because of fear and because of a structure, and we're not really putting these into effect. And I do think that there's this model from Europe that you're always against the state and you fight the state, and that is a model that I would hope that in America that eventually changes, and in Israel that changes, but I think we're still many communities are still in that model of viewing the outside world as something negative that you have to fight, that you have to fear. And so I think it's that fear and that construct, political construct, that really gets in the way of these principles that I think the entire Orthodox world would subscribe to.
I refer to the Torah Kadmon discussions we had. Just reminded of two similar aspects of philosophy or theology. Firstly, the Zohar itself makes itself up as a Torah Kadmon. And secondly, the Aristotelian philosophy goes exactly the unmovable, which goes back forever. So are they not really religious, those two?
Yes, the gentleman, the question was addressing some of the kind of intellectual antecedents of the Torah Kadmon theology. So you have the Zohar, he mentioned. Indeed, the Zohar subscribes to the Torah Kadmon theology. There's one of the canonical examples of the Zohar says God looked into the Torah and created the world, and perhaps the Zohar presents itself as part of the content of the Torah Kadmon in conjunction with the Pentateuch and other things. And Aristotle's notion of the unmoved mover, this perfect transcendent God and his wisdom. Also it ties into Plato, the idea of Platonic forms, that anything in this world is just some pale reflection of a perfect ideal. So even our own Torah is just a pale reflection of a perfect ideal. So it's also part of Jewish Platonism. Yes, and it goes back to earlier questions about the kind of sociology of belief. How did the Jews come up with this stuff? Well, we didn't create it in a vacuum.